The morning Sarah Martinez woke up to alien ships hanging in Earth's sky was the same morning she realized humanity had been underestimated for the last time. She stood on the balcony of her apartment in downtown Denver, coffee mug in hand, watching massive triangular vessels hover motionless above every major city on the planet. The ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. They had appeared overnight without warning, without sound, without any attempt at communication. Sarah wasn't panicking like the crowds gathering in the streets below. As a former Marine Corps sniper turned emergency response coordinator, she had learned long ago that panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she was calculating angles, estimating distances, and wondering how something that large could float so quietly. Her phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Not from the government, which had gone mysteriously silent, but from her old unit commander, Colonel James Harrison. The message was simple. Rally Point Alpha. Bring your gear. Time to show them what humans do best. Sarah smiled grimly. Rally Point Alpha was an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where her former teammates used to meet for unofficial training exercises. If Harrison was calling them together, it meant the government response was either compromised or non-existent. It also meant they were about to do something typically human. Refuse to surrender without a fight. She grabbed her emergency bag, already packed with her custom rifle, and enough ammunition to start a small war. As she headed for the door, the alien ships began to move for the first time since their arrival. They descended slowly, deliberately, as if their occupants were savoring the moment before making contact with what they probably assumed was a helpless planet. The drive to the warehouse took twice as long as usual. The roads were clogged with people fleeing the city, abandoned cars, and emergency vehicles racing toward uncertain destinations. Sarah navigated through the chaos with the calm precision that had made her one of the Corps' most effective snipers. She had learned patience during long hours lying motionless in hostile territory, waiting for the perfect shot. Today, she suspected, would require that same patience. When she arrived at the warehouse, 17 other vehicles were already parked outside. Sarah recognized most of them. Her old team was gathering, along with others from different units: Marines, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Air Force pararescue specialists. The kind of people who had volunteered for the hardest jobs in the military because they believed someone needed to do them. Inside the warehouse, Colonel Harrison stood before a hastily assembled group of 43 men and women. He looked older than Sarah remembered, but his voice still carried the authority that had guided them through 3 combat deployments. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, "I'll keep this brief. As of 6 hours ago, all official communication from Washington has ceased. Our satellites are being jammed, our military bases have gone dark, and every attempt to contact the alien vessels has been ignored. We are, for all practical purposes, on our own." A hand went up. Sergeant Mike Torres, Sarah's former spotter. "Sir, what's our intel on these ships? Any idea what we're dealing with?" Harrison clicked a remote, and a projector displayed grainy photographs taken by civilians with telescopes and high-powered cameras. The images showed the alien vessels in detail for the first time. They were even larger than they appeared from the ground, easily the size of aircraft carriers but floating effortlessly in the atmosphere. Based on these images and preliminary analysis from our remaining contacts in the scientific community, Harrison continued, these ships appear to be constructed from materials we don't recognize. The energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever propulsion system they're using, it operates on principles we don't understand. Sarah studied the images carefully. The ships were impressive, but she noticed something interesting. Despite their advanced technology, they were hovering at a relatively low altitude, low enough for ground-based weapons to reach them, if those weapons were powerful enough and accurately aimed. "Colonel," she said, raising her hand, "have they made any demands? Any communication at all?" "Nothing," Harrison replied. "Complete radio silence. But intelligence suggests they're conducting some kind of scanning operation. We believe they're cataloging our defenses, our population centers, our infrastructure." Classic pre-invasion reconnaissance. The room fell quiet. Everyone present had seen enough combat to understand what that meant. The aliens weren't here to negotiate. They were here to take what they wanted, probably assuming that humanity would roll over without significant resistance. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. Harrison continued his briefing. Here's what we know about human nature that they probably don't. We're stubborn. We're adaptable. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years, which means we've gotten very good at it. And when something threatens our home, we stop fighting each other and start fighting it instead. Sarah nodded. She had seen it before, during her deployments overseas. Local populations who had been bitter enemies would suddenly unite when facing an external threat. Humans had an almost supernatural ability to put aside their differences when survival was at stake. Our mission, Harrison said, is to demonstrate to our uninvited guests that conquering Earth won't be the simple operation they apparently think it is. We're going to hit them hard, fast, and in ways they won't expect. We're going to show them that every human on this planet is a potential combatant, and that we don't fight by their rules. The plan Harrison outlined was audacious in its simplicity. They would divide into small teams and take positions around the city. When the aliens inevitably deployed ground forces, the teams would engage in guerrilla warfare, using hit-and-run tactics to inflict maximum damage while avoiding direct confrontation with superior technology. Sarah was assigned to lead Team Echo, consisting of herself, Torres, and 2 Army Rangers she had worked with before. Their position would be on the roof of a 40-story office building with clear lines of sight to the alien ship hovering over the city center. As they prepared to move out, Harrison pulled Sarah aside. Martinez, you've got the longest confirmed kill shot in the unit's history. If we get a chance to take out something important, I'm counting on you to make it happen. Sarah checked her rifle one more time. It was a custom-built 338 Lapua Magnum, designed for extreme long-range precision shooting. She had made shots with it at distances that other snipers considered impossible. Today, she might need to exceed even those limits. The climb to the roof of the office building took 30 minutes, moving carefully to avoid detection. By the time they reached their position, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. The alien ship hung motionless above them, so close that Sarah could see details on its hull that hadn't been visible from the ground. Through her scope, she observed what appeared to be docking bays opening along the ship's underside. Smaller craft began emerging, sleek and angular. Like the mothership but sized for atmospheric flight, they moved in perfect formation, descending towards strategic points throughout the city. Contact in 60 seconds, Torres whispered into his radio. Multiple bogies inbound. All teams, weapons free when they hit the ground. Sarah adjusted her scope and settled into her shooting position. She had learned long ago that the key to successful sniping wasn't just marksmanship, it was patience. Wait for the right target. Wait for the right moment. Then make the shot count. The alien craft touched down in parks, parking lots, and intersections throughout the city. Sarah watched through her scope as ramps lowered, and the first alien soldiers emerged. They were tall, perhaps 7 feet in height, wearing armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Their weapons were sleek and obviously advanced, but they moved with the careful precision of troops who expected minimal resistance. That was their first mistake. The opening shot came from Team Charlie, positioned 2 miles away on the opposite side of the city. The sharp crack of a high-powered rifle echoed across the urban landscape, followed immediately by what sounded like an explosion. Through her scope, Sarah saw one of the alien soldiers stumble backward, apparently hit by a .50 caliber round that had punched through whatever protection his armor provided. The aliens reacted with startling speed, but not in the way Sarah expected. Instead of taking cover or calling for air support, they began advancing methodically toward the source of the gunfire. They moved like soldiers who had never faced serious opposition, confident in their technological superiority. That was their second mistake. Sarah selected her target carefully. Through her scope, she could see what appeared to be a command figure among the aliens, distinguishable by additional markings on his armor and the way other soldiers oriented themselves around him. The distance was extreme, nearly 2,000 meters, but well within her capabilities. She controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow to the rhythm she had trained for years to achieve. The wind was minimal, the lighting adequate, the target clearly defined. Sarah had made harder shots than this, but never with so much riding on the outcome. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with the familiar authority of perfectly controlled violence. The bullet crossed the distance between her position and the alien commander in just over 2 seconds, arriving with the kind of kinetic energy that no amount of advanced armor could completely absorb. The alien commander dropped instantly, his weapon clattering across the pavement. The soldiers around him froze for a moment, apparently trying to process what had just happened. In that moment of confusion, gunfire erupted from a dozen different positions around the city as the other teams opened fire. What followed was unlike any battle in human history. The aliens had superior technology, superior armor, and superior weapons, but they were fighting an enemy that didn't behave according to any tactical doctrine they understood. Humans appeared from impossible angles, took shots that shouldn't have been possible, and disappeared into the urban environment like ghosts. The aliens had come expecting to fight an army. Instead, they found themselves facing 43 highly trained individuals who had spent years learning to kill efficiently and disappear quickly. It was like trying to fight smoke. Sarah's team relocated 3 times in the first hour, each time setting up in a new position and engaging targets before moving again. The aliens adapted quickly, but not quickly enough. For every position they identified and destroyed with their advanced weapons, 2 more appeared elsewhere. By midnight, the alien forces had withdrawn to their landing craft. Sarah counted at least 15 confirmed kills among her team's targets, and the radio chatter from other teams suggested similar success rates. More importantly, the aliens had learned something about humans that their initial reconnaissance hadn't revealed. Earth's inhabitants weren't going to surrender quietly. As dawn approached, the alien ships began to rise higher into the atmosphere, moving beyond the range of ground-based weapons. Sarah watched them through her scope, knowing this was just the beginning. The aliens would be back, probably with different tactics and better preparation, but they would still be facing humans. And humans, Sarah had learned over years of combat, were very good at adapting to new challenges. She broke down her rifle and packed her gear, already planning for the next engagement. The aliens had hit the ground hard, expecting Earth to crumble under their technological superiority. Instead, they had encountered something their advanced civilization apparently hadn't prepared them for. A species that refused to accept defeat, no matter how hopeless the odds appeared. They had met humans at war, and humans had been perfecting warfare for millennia. The real battle was just beginning, and Sarah Martinez couldn't wait to show them what else humanity had learned during its long, violent history. The aliens had made the mistake of thinking that superior technology guaranteed victory. They were about to discover why that assumption had proven fatal to so many of humanity's enemies throughout history. 3 weeks after the first skirmish, the aliens returned with a completely different strategy. Sarah Martinez crouched in the ruins of what used to be a shopping mall, watching through her scope as massive construction mechs began establishing a fortified base on the outskirts of Denver. The aliens had learned their first lesson about humanity. Never underestimate an enemy that fights dirty. The base was impressive, rising from the ground like some metallic cancer. Automated systems worked around the clock, assembling structures that seemed to grow rather than being built. Force fields shimmered around the perimeter, and weapons platforms tracked across the sky with mechanical precision. The aliens had clearly decided that their mobile approach hadn't worked and were switching to something more defensible. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. All teams, be advised. Intelligence suggests they're building some kind of processing facility. Best guess is they're planning to start converting our infrastructure to support their technology. Sarah adjusted her position, careful not to create any reflection that might give away her location. The aliens had brought different troops this time, smaller and more heavily armored, moving with the cautious precision of soldiers who had learned to respect their enemy. Good. Respect was something humans understood. Processing facility for what? Came Torres's voice over the radio. He was positioned 3 blocks away, in the skeleton of a burned-out office building. Unknown, Harrison replied. But given their behavior so far, probably not anything we'd approve of. Teams echo through hotel, maintain surveillance, and wait for my signal. They've gotten smarter about our tactics, so we need to be smarter too. Sarah had spent the past 3 weeks studying everything they had learned about their visitors. The aliens were clearly from a highly advanced civilization, probably one that had conquered multiple worlds before arriving at Earth. Their technology was generations beyond anything humans possessed. Their weapons could punch holes through tank armor, and their force fields could deflect most conventional explosives. But they had weaknesses. They communicated through some kind of electromagnetic network that could be disrupted with the right kind of interference. Their armor, while incredibly strong, had joints and connection points that could be exploited with precise shooting. Most importantly, they seemed to have trouble adapting to the kind of chaotic, improvisational warfare that humans excelled at. Sarah had been a sniper for 12 years before leaving the Marines. She had learned that the key to defeating a superior enemy wasn't to match their strengths, but to exploit their weaknesses. The aliens were methodical, logical, predictable. Humans were creative, stubborn, and completely insane when cornered. Movement through her scope caught her attention. A group of alien workers was installing what looked like a communications array on top of the main structure. The array was heavily defended, surrounded by automated gun turrets and protected by overlapping force fields. But Sarah noticed something interesting about its design. The array needed a clear line of sight to function properly, which meant it had to extend above the base's defensive perimeter, and anything that extended above the perimeter might be vulnerable to the right kind of attack from the right angle. Sarah keyed her radio. Colonel, I've got eyes on what looks like a priority target. Communications array. Heavily defended but possibly vulnerable. Permission to take the shot? Negative, Martinez. Too well defended. We need to wait for a better opportunity. Sarah understood Harrison's caution. But she also understood something he might not have considered. The aliens were getting stronger every hour. Their base remained operational. Every day they waited was another day for the invaders to consolidate their position and bring in reinforcements. Sometimes the best opportunity was the one you created yourself. Torres, she whispered into her radio. Remember that EMP device the tech guys rigged up? The one that's supposed to disrupt their force fields? Yeah, but it only works at close range. Someone would have to get within 50 meters of the target. I know, Sarah said, already calculating angles and distances. Cover me. Before Harrison could countermand her decision, Sarah was moving. She had identified a route through the rubble that would bring her within range of the communications array, using destroyed buildings and abandoned vehicles for cover. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, but it was also the kind of unexpected move that might catch the aliens off guard. The EMP device was crude by human standards, barely more than a modified electromagnetic pulse generator that a group of electrical engineers had cobbled together from salvaged parts. But it was designed specifically to disrupt the frequency patterns they had observed in alien technology. If it worked, it would create a brief window where the force fields protecting the communications array would fail. If it didn't work, Sarah would be dead within seconds. She moved through the ruins with the careful precision of someone who had spent years learning to be invisible. The aliens had sensors and automated defenses, but they were calibrated to detect normal human movement patterns. Sarah had learned to move like smoke, flowing from cover to cover without creating the kind of thermal or kinetic signatures that would trigger their detection systems. The base was even more impressive up close. The alien construction techniques created structures that seemed to defy physics, curving and flowing in ways that human architecture never attempted. The materials had a strange quality, seeming to absorb light and sound, making the entire facility feel like a void in the landscape. Sarah reached her position. A collapsed concrete wall that provided cover while keeping her within the EMP device's effective range. Through her scope, she could see the communications array clearly, its crystalline components glowing with internal energy. Multiple force field generators surrounded it, creating overlapping protective barriers that would stop any conventional weapon. But the generators all drew power from the same source, routed through connection points that had to remain outside the force fields to function properly. If the EMP disrupted the power flow at exactly the right moment, the entire defensive network would collapse for a few seconds. Sarah activated the EMP device and felt rather than heard the pulse of electromagnetic energy that erupted from it. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every force field around the communications array flickered and died, leaving the delicate equipment completely exposed. Sarah's rifle was already lined up on her target. The distance was only 400 meters, an easy shot under normal circumstances, but she had perhaps 3 seconds before the force fields regenerated, and she needed to hit a target the size of a dinner plate with enough force to destroy equipment designed to withstand asteroid impacts. The shot was perfect. Sarah had spent thousands of hours training for moments exactly like this, when everything depended on one bullet arriving at precisely the right place at exactly the right time. The armor-piercing round struck the central processor of the communications array and detonated with enough force to shatter the crystalline components into glittering fragments. The effect was immediate. Every alien in the base stopped moving for a moment, as if they had all suddenly gone deaf. Their network was down, their coordination disrupted, their careful plans reduced to chaos. That was when the rest of Harrison's teams opened fire. Explosions erupted around the base as hidden snipers targeted weak points they had identified during weeks of observation. Automated defenses tried to respond, but without their central communications hub, they couldn't coordinate their fire effectively. The aliens found themselves fighting the same kind of chaotic, multi-directional battle that had cost them so heavily during their first assault. Sarah didn't wait to admire her handiwork. The moment she fired, she was moving, relocating to a position she had scouted earlier. The aliens would pinpoint her location within minutes and respond with overwhelming firepower. The key to survival was never being where the enemy expected you to be. She had just reached her secondary position when the entire area where she had been hiding disappeared in a blast of superheated plasma. The aliens didn't mess around when it came to revenge, but they were still thinking like conventional soldiers, assuming their enemy would remain in position after taking a shot. Humans, Sarah reflected as she settled into her new firing position, had learned long ago that sometimes the best defense was to never be where your enemy was shooting. The battle continued for 6 hours, with human teams appearing from impossible positions to take shots at critical targets before vanishing again into the urban maze. The aliens adapted quickly, bringing in aerial drones and energy weapons that could level entire buildings. But for every position they destroyed, humans appeared somewhere else, always just outside their detection range, always hitting targets they hadn't expected to be vulnerable. By sunset, the alien base was still operational, but barely. 3 of their major systems had been destroyed. Their communications network remained offline, and their automated defenses were operating at perhaps 30% efficiency. More importantly, they had learned another lesson about human warfare. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to teach their enemies that victory would cost more than defeat. Sarah was repositioning again when she spotted something that made her freeze. A group of human civilians, apparently captured during the aliens' initial sweep of the area, were being herded into the base. Men, women, children, all wearing the kind of resigned expressions that came from too much fear and not enough hope. That changed everything. All teams, Sarah said into her radio, be advised. I have eyes on approximately 30 civilian hostages being moved into the base. Repeat, hostages in play. Harrison's response was immediate. All teams stand down. Do not engage targets that might endanger civilian lives. Repeat, civilian safety is now priority 1. Sarah understood the order. But she also understood something else. The aliens had just made their biggest mistake yet. They had given humans something more powerful than advanced weapons or superior tactics. They had given them a reason to stop fighting like soldiers and start fighting like family members whose loved ones were in danger. She keyed her radio again. Colonel, I need permission to attempt a rescue operation. Negative, Martinez. Too dangerous, and we don't have enough people for an assault on a fortified position. Not an assault, Sarah said, studying the base through her scope. A infiltration. I can get inside their perimeter, create enough chaos to allow the civilians to escape, and get out before they can respond effectively. It was a terrible plan with almost no chance of success. The alien base was heavily defended, filled with soldiers equipped with technology that could track human heat signatures and protected by weapons that could vaporize anything that moved. Getting inside would require her to bypass systems she didn't understand, using equipment that was generations behind theirs. But the children in that group of hostages looked to be about the same age as her nephew, and Sarah Martinez had not spent 12 years as a Marine sniper just to watch kids get processed by alien invaders. "I'm going in," she said, and switched off her radio before Harrison could countermand the order. The infiltration took 4 hours of careful movement, using every technique she had learned during her military career, plus a few she improvised on the spot. The aliens had sensors everywhere, but they were calibrated to detect normal human behavior. They weren't expecting someone to approach their base by crawling through storm drains, emerging through waste processing systems, and using their own energy fields to mask human heat signatures. By the time Sarah reached the holding area where the civilians were being kept, she had bypassed 17 different security systems and disabled 3 automated sentries. She had also confirmed her suspicion about alien weaknesses. They were so accustomed to technological superiority that they didn't plan for enemies who fought with pure determination and improvised weapons. The rescue itself took 12 minutes. Sarah used shaped charges made from scavenged explosives to create multiple exits, then guided the civilians through routes she had mapped during her infiltration. The aliens responded quickly once they detected the security breach. But by then, Sarah had the hostages moving through passages too small for alien soldiers and too chaotic for their weapons to target effectively. She got 32 people out of that base, including 7 children under the age of 10. When the extraction was complete and the civilians were safely away from the combat zone, Sarah allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel satisfaction before getting back to work. The aliens had hit the ground hard, expecting to establish a foothold for their invasion. Instead, they had learned that humans fought differently when their families were threatened. They fought with a ferocity that no amount of technology could overcome, and a creativity that no tactical algorithm could predict. As Sarah settled into her next position, she smiled grimly. The aliens still had superior weapons and better armor, but they were fighting an enemy that got more dangerous every time they escalated the conflict. They were fighting humans who had finally stopped treating this like a military engagement and started treating it like what it really was: a fight for their home. 6 months after the first alien ships appeared in Earth's skies, Sarah Martinez stood on the observation deck of humanity's first reverse-engineered alien vessel, watching the invaders' mothership retreat into the darkness beyond Earth's moon. The war was over, but not because either side had achieved total victory. It was over because the aliens had finally learned the most important lesson about humanity. Some species simply refused to be conquered. The ship beneath Sarah's feet hummed with power systems that human engineers were still trying to understand. It had been captured 3 weeks earlier during what the aliens probably thought would be their final assault on Earth. They had brought their most advanced technology, their elite troops, and enough firepower to reduce entire continents to ash. What they hadn't brought was an understanding of what humans became when you gave them 6 months to learn, adapt, and get really, really angry. Colonel Harrison joined Sarah at the viewing window, his uniform bearing new insignia that designated him as commander of Earth's first extraterrestrial defense force. It was a title that would have seemed like science fiction a year earlier. Now it was just another job that needed doing. "The long-range sensors show their main fleet is moving beyond the outer planets," Harrison said. "Intel thinks they're heading home to report what happened here." Sarah nodded, watching the alien ship's drive systems create ripples in space-time that human physics was only beginning to explain. "What do you think they'll tell their superiors about us?" Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Probably that Earth is more trouble than it's worth, at least for now." The story of how humanity had turned the tide of an alien invasion could be told in many ways, but Sarah preferred the simple version. Humans had done what humans always did. When faced with impossible odds, they had refused to accept that the odds were impossible. The breakthrough had come 2 months into the occupation, when a group of electrical engineers in Detroit had figured out how to reverse the polarity of alien energy weapons. It wasn't sophisticated science, just the kind of creative problem-solving that humans specialized in. If you couldn't build better weapons, you modified the ones your enemy gave you. Within weeks, Resistance cells across the planet were using captured alien technology against its creators. Plasma rifles that had been designed to vaporize human targets were recalibrated to overload alien force fields. Communication devices became weapons for spreading virus codes through alien networks. Even their construction materials were repurposed, creating armor that could stop their own energy weapons. But the real turning point hadn't been technological. It had been psychological. The aliens, Sarah had learned, came from a civilization that had conquered 17 different worlds over the past 3 centuries. Their strategy was always the same: demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority, occupy strategic positions, and wait for the local population to accept the inevitable. It had worked perfectly on every world they had encountered, until they met humans. The problem with humans, from an alien perspective, was that they didn't understand the concept of inevitable defeat. They understood temporary setbacks, tactical retreats, and strategic disadvantages. But the idea that superior technology automatically meant surrender was completely foreign to them. So when the aliens established their occupation zones and waited for humanity to submit, humans did something unexpected instead. They learned. They adapted. They improvised. They took every piece of alien technology they could capture, reverse engineered it with the kind of creative desperation that only came from fighting for survival, and turned it into weapons their enemies had never imagined. Sarah remembered the day everything changed. She had been leading a raid on an alien supply convoy when her team encountered something new: human-built weapons that fired alien energy bolts, powered by captured alien power cells, and guided by targeting systems that combined alien sensors with human intuition. The convoy had been protected by automated defenses that could track and destroy conventional human weapons, but they weren't programmed to recognize hybrid technology that shouldn't have existed according to alien understanding of human capabilities. Sarah's team had destroyed the entire convoy without losing a single person, using weapons that the aliens' own computers couldn't identify as threats. That was the moment the aliens realized they weren't fighting a primitive species with captured technology. They were fighting engineers. The war had escalated quickly after that. The aliens brought in heavier forces, more advanced weapons, stronger defenses. Humans responded by getting more creative. If alien shields could stop human bullets, humans built bullets that could overload alien shields. If alien armor could absorb kinetic impacts, humans created weapons that bypassed armor entirely by attacking the power systems underneath. Every escalation taught both sides something new about their opponents. The aliens learned that humans could adapt to any technology given enough time and motivation. Humans learned that alien civilization was built on the assumption that technological superiority was the only factor that mattered in warfare. Both sides were wrong about that assumption. The final battle had taken place in orbit above Earth, when the aliens deployed their planetary bombardment systems and prepared to reduce human civilization to radioactive ash, rather than continue dealing with what they had begun to refer to as the persistently problematic population of the third planet. That was when humanity played its final card. The captured alien ship Sarah now stood on had been taken during a boarding action that should have been impossible. Humans weren't supposed to be able to breach alien force fields, navigate alien ship designs, or survive in the vacuum of space long enough to conduct military operations. But humans had never been particularly concerned with what they weren't supposed to be able to do. The boarding party had consisted of 43 volunteers, all wearing improvised spacesuits built from captured alien environmental gear and powered by hybrid life support systems that combined alien technology with human engineering. They had approached the alien ship using captured alien stealth technology, modified with human innovations that made them effectively invisible to alien sensors. Sarah had been part of that boarding party. She remembered the moment they breached the alien ship's hull and found themselves face to face with crew members who clearly hadn't expected to be boarded by what they considered a primitive species. The aliens had superior weapons, better armor, and home field advantage. Humans had motivation. The battle inside the alien ship had lasted 6 hours and ranged through corridors designed for beings who thought differently about space and movement than humans did. The aliens fought with precision and coordination, using tactics that had proven successful on 17 other worlds. Humans fought with improvised weapons, jury-rigged explosives, and the kind of tactical creativity that came from a species that had been practicing warfare against its own members for thousands of years. They turned alien technology against itself, used the ship's own systems as weapons, and demonstrated the kind of adaptive problem-solving that their enemies had never encountered. When the last alien crew member surrendered, humanity officially had its first space-capable warship. More importantly, they had demonstrated something that changed the entire strategic situation. Humans could not only survive in space, they could fight there. The alien response had been swift and decisive. Within hours of losing their ship, the entire alien fleet began preparing for immediate departure. No negotiations, no final ultimatums, no attempt to recover their captured vessel, just a rapid, organized withdrawal from Earth's solar system. Sarah had initially thought it was a tactical retreat, preparation for a larger assault. But intercepted communications suggested something different. The aliens weren't regrouping for another attack. They were reporting to their superiors that Earth was uneconomical to conquer. The cost-benefit analysis was simple. Humans would never stop fighting, never accept defeat, and never stop learning from their enemies. Every piece of technology the aliens introduced would eventually be turned against them. Every tactical advantage they deployed would eventually be countered by human adaptability. Conquering Earth would require the aliens to commit resources indefinitely, fighting an enemy that got stronger with every engagement. From a strategic perspective, it made more sense to mark humanity as a dangerous species and avoid contact until they developed interstellar capability on their own, which, given human adaptability and their newly acquired alien technology, would probably happen much sooner than the aliens preferred. Harrison's voice interrupted Sarah's thoughts. Command wants to know if you're interested in heading up our new deep space reconnaissance program. Apparently, we need someone to scout ahead and make sure our new neighbors know we're not planning to be as easy to deal with as they hoped. Sarah smiled. 6 months ago, she had been a retired Marine sniper living in a Denver apartment. Now, she was being offered command of humanity's first interstellar military mission. It was the kind of career trajectory that only made sense during an alien invasion. What kind of timeline are we looking at? She asked. First mission launches in 6 months. We'll be using this ship as a testbed for human modifications to alien technology. The engineers think they can improve the drive system's efficiency by 30%, upgrade the weapons to fire human-designed munitions, and add defensive systems that combine the best of both technologies. Sarah looked out at the stars, each one representing possibilities that hadn't existed before the aliens arrived. Humanity had been forced into an interstellar conflict, but they had emerged from it with capabilities they never would have developed on their own. One question, Sarah said. When we make contact with other species, how do we make sure they understand that we're not looking for a fight, but we're prepared for one if necessary? Harrison smiled. I think our reputation will precede us. Word travels fast in galactic civilizations, and what happened here is going to be studied by every military strategist in known space. Earth just demonstrated that technological superiority doesn't guarantee victory against an enemy that refuses to be defeated. As Sarah watched the alien ship disappear into the darkness between stars, she reflected on the lessons both species had learned during their brief, violent acquaintance. The aliens had learned that some species were too dangerous to conquer, too adaptable to suppress, and too stubborn to intimidate. Humans had learned that they were no longer alone in the universe, but they were still uniquely human in their response to threats. When faced with superior technology, they built better technology. When confronted with overwhelming force, they found ways to make that force irrelevant. When told that resistance was futile, they proved that futility was a matter of perspective. The war was over, but the real adventure was just beginning. Humanity now had the stars within reach, advanced technology to explore them, and the knowledge that they could hold their own against anything the galaxy might throw at them. The aliens had hit the ground hard, expecting Earth to crumble under their technological superiority. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant that refused to go back to sleep. Humanity had remained unshaken through invasion, occupation, and attempted extermination. Now it was time to see what else was out there. and whether the rest of the galaxy was prepared for the kind of neighbors humans intended to be. Sarah suspected it wasn't, but that was the galaxy's problem to solve. Humans had already proven they were very good at solving problems that seemed impossible. Everything else was just a matter of scale.